On my 70th birthday, my son told me he had an important business dinner. 20 minutes later, I walked into our favorite restaurant and found him raising a glass with his wife and her wealthy mother. I don't think my heart had ever gone that quiet before. My name is Bill Carter. I live in Carmel, Indiana, just north of Indianapolis. I spent 43 years running a small electrical contracting business before retiring at 68. Nothing fancy. Just honest work, early mornings, cold winters, and enough overtime to give my wife Linda and our son Michael a comfortable life. Linda passed away 8 years ago after a long fight with pancreatic cancer. Since then, birthdays haven't meant much, except for one tradition. Every year, Michael and I had dinner at Sullivan's Steakhouse downtown. Same corner booth, same porterhouse for him, same prime rib for me. We'd order Linda's favorite cheesecake even though neither of us ever finished it. It was our way of keeping her seat at the table. That morning, I woke up to a quiet house. I made myself coffee, watered the flowers Linda had planted years ago, and waited for Michael's call. It came around 11. "Happy birthday, Dad." "Thanks, son. 7 o'clock, still work." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Dad. I have a business dinner tonight. A really important one. I've been trying to move this meeting, but I just can't." I stood at the kitchen window for a second. Outside, my neighbor's grandson was helping him wash his pickup truck. I smiled anyway. "Don't worry about it. Business comes first sometimes." "You sure?" "Of course. I'll make it up to you this weekend." "You don't owe me anything. Go take care of work." When we hung up, I stayed standing there longer than I should have. I almost canceled the reservation. Instead, I showered, shaved carefully, put on the navy sport coat Linda had always liked, and drove downtown. I told myself there was no reason a man couldn't enjoy a good steak by himself. The hostess recognized me immediately. "Mr. Carter, happy birthday," I laughed. "So much for keeping it a secret." She smiled. "Your usual table, if it's available." She picked up 2 menus. As she started leading me through the dining room, I happened to glance toward the back windows. That's when I saw him. Michael. He wasn't sitting with clients. He wasn't surrounded by executives. He was laughing over a bottle of wine with Ashley, and Ashley's mother, Diane. No laptops, no presentation folders, no business meeting, just family. For a moment, I honestly wondered if maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe the business dinner had ended early. Maybe these people had just arrived. Then I watched Diane raise her wineglass. Michael raised his. Ashley smiled politely. The 3 of them clinked glasses together. The hostess noticed I'd stopped walking. "Everything okay?" I looked back at her. "Would it be possible?" My voice almost cracked. "To sit somewhere else?" She looked confused. "Certainly." I nodded toward the table directly behind theirs. "If that one's available, I'd like that one." She glanced from me to Michael. Understanding slowly crossed her face. She didn't ask another question. She simply picked up the menus again. "Right this way, Mr. Carter." I sat down only a few feet behind my own son. None of them noticed me. A waiter poured my water. Someone lit the candle on my table. And just as I opened the menu, I heard Diane's unmistakable voice carrying through the restaurant. "You know what separates successful families from ordinary ones?" I wasn't hungry anymore. Diane had one of those voices people automatically turn toward. Not loud, just confident. The kind of confidence that comes from never having to wonder whether the bill will clear or whether the mortgage payment is due next week. She swirled her wine before taking a sip. "You know what separates successful families from ordinary ones?" she asked. Michael smiled politely. "What's that?" "We don't waste our time trying to make everyone comfortable." Ashley sighed softly. "Mom." "No, let me finish." Diane leaned back in her chair. "Most middle-class people spend their whole lives believing hard work alone changes everything. It doesn't. Connections do. Influence does. The right rooms. The right introductions." She lifted one perfectly manicured finger. "Money simply opens the doors." Ashley looked down at her plate. "I don't think it's that simple." Diane smiled the way teachers smile at children who give the wrong answer. "Sweetheart, that's because you've always had those doors open. You don't realize what life looks like without them." I sat perfectly still. The waiter came by to ask if I was ready to order. Prime rib, I whispered. Medium. Very good, sir. As he walked away, Diane continued. Michael understands. I watched my son shift uncomfortably in his chair. He knows what building relationships can do for a business. Michael nodded once. It definitely helps. There you go. She reached over and patted his hand. You were a hard-working young man before you married Ashley. Then she smiled. But let's be honest. If Ashley hadn't brought you into our circle, would your company have grown this fast? Michael didn't answer. He didn't have to. Silence answered for him. Ashley finally spoke. Michael built that company. He worked nights. He worked weekends. He earned every client. Diane laughed softly. Oh, sweetheart. I'm not saying he didn't work. I'm saying hard work gets you into the parking lot. The right family gets you inside the building. Something inside me tightened. Not because I disagreed with everything she said. I'd been in business long enough to know networking mattered. She wasn't completely wrong. It was the way she said it, as though people who hadn't climbed as high somehow deserved less respect. She cut another piece of filet mignon. People from ordinary families always think success comes from effort. They don't understand leverage. Ashley set down her fork. My father worked 60 years in a machine shop. He wasn't ordinary. He was a good man. I know, Diane answered, but goodness and influence aren't the same thing. Then she glanced toward Michael. You're fortunate. You married into a family that could introduce you to people your own family never would. My chest felt heavy. Not because she'd insulted me. A stranger's opinion has never paid my bills or kept me awake at night. What hurt was hearing my own son stay quiet. He didn't agree with her. I could see that much. His shoulders had stiffened. He avoided eye contact. He stared into his wine glass. But he also didn't say the one sentence I kept waiting for. Please don't talk about my father like that. Ashley finally did. Mom, enough. Bill has always treated me like his own daughter. I won't sit here while you talk about him that way. Diane shrugged. I'm talking about social reality, not Bill personally. Ashley shook her head. No. You're talking about people like they have different value depending on what's in their bank account. For the first time that evening, I felt a little warmth return to my chest. Not from Michael, from Ashley. Maybe she'd noticed more over the years than I'd realized. Diane dabbed her lips with her napkin. You'll understand someday. Ashley folded her arms. I hope I never do. The tension hung over the table for several long seconds. Finally, Diane pushed back her chair. I'm going to freshen up. I'll be right back. She walked toward the restrooms without another word. The moment she disappeared around the corner, Ashley turned toward Michael. Her voice dropped low. You should have said something. Michael rubbed both hands across his face. You don't understand. No, Ashley replied quietly. I understand exactly what just happened. He looked exhausted. If I challenge your mother every time she says something like that, and she'll shut me out. Ashley stared at him. So those relationships disappear. So do investors. So do introductions. Our company is finally growing. I can't afford to burn those bridges. Ashley looked at him in disbelief. So you're willing to let her insult your own father instead? Michael lowered his eyes. He didn't answer. That silence hurt more than anything Diane had said all evening. I slowly pushed my chair back. I realized I was done listening. I stood up slowly. At 70 people expect you to move carefully anyway, so nobody paid much attention as I walked toward their table. Michael was still staring down at his untouched steak. Ashley had her arms folded. She looked disappointed. Not angry, disappointed. There's a difference. I stopped beside them. Neither of them noticed until my shadow fell across the table. Ashley looked up first. Her eyes widened. Oh! Michael followed her gaze. For a split second, he didn't recognize me. Then all the color drained from his face. Dad! He pushed his chair back so quickly it scraped across the hardwood floor. He looked from me to the hallway where Diane had disappeared. Then back to me. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Ashley stood too. Bill, I smiled. Not because I felt happy, because I knew if I didn't smile, I might say something I'd regret. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The restaurant carried on around us. Silverware clinked. Someone laughed across the room. A server walked past carrying a tray of sizzling steaks. Life has a strange way of continuing, even when yours feels like it's stopped. Michael finally found his voice. "Dad, I can explain." I looked at him. Really looked at him. He still had the same freckles across his nose he'd had since elementary school. The same crooked smile. The same eyes Linda used to say could never hide guilt. Tonight they weren't hiding much. Before I could answer, Ashley spoke. "I'm so sorry." She wasn't apologizing for herself. I could hear that. She was apologizing because she'd seen everything unfold. I gently raised one hand. "You don't owe me an apology." Then I turned toward her. "You know," my voice caught for just a moment, "Linda would have liked you." Ashley's eyes filled immediately. I stepped forward and gave her a gentle hug. She hugged me back without hesitation. It wasn't dramatic. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, but I felt her shoulders trembling. I leaned back just enough to look at her. "Thank you," she blinked. "For what?" "For remembering that an old man deserves respect." She shook her head. "Bill? No." I smiled again. "Thank you." I gave her hand a light squeeze. Only then did I finally turn to Michael. He looked absolutely miserable. "Dad, I know. You don't." "I do." "No, Dad, please." He took one step toward me. I took one back. Not out of anger. I just wasn't ready. "You said you had a business dinner." I suppose you weren't lying completely." He frowned. I glanced toward the empty chair where Diane had been sitting. "Business seems very important tonight." His eyes dropped to the floor. I should have called. "You should have told me the truth." "I'm sorry. I know. You have every right to be angry." I thought about that. Then I shook my head. "I'm not angry." That surprised even me. "I'm disappointed." His shoulders sank. That single sentence landed harder than if I'd shouted across the dining room. There was nothing left to add. No lecture, no accusations, no scene. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the birthday card I'd planned to give him. Inside was an old photograph. Michael at 10 years old. The two of us holding up the first fish he'd ever caught. I'd carried it all evening because I thought he'd smile when he saw it. Instead, I slipped it back into my pocket. "Happy dinner, son." Then I nodded once toward Ashley. "Drive home safely." I turned and walked away. Behind me, nobody called out. Not immediately. I made it almost to the front entrance before I heard footsteps. Ashley. She caught up to me just outside beneath the string lights hanging over the sidewalk. "I'm so sorry." "I know. He loves you." "I know. I know." She looked like she wanted to cry again. "I'll make him fix this." I smiled sadly. "No. You can't fix something another person has to understand." She lowered her head. I placed one hand gently on her shoulder. "Take care of him." "I will. And take care of yourself too." She nodded. I walked to my truck alone. As I started the engine, I glanced through the restaurant window one last time. Michael was still standing exactly where I'd left him. He hadn't touched his dinner. For the first time that night, I wondered if maybe the deepest wounds aren't the ones people give us. Maybe they're the ones we realize we've given someone else. I drove home in silence. That night, something changed between my son and me. Neither of us knew it yet. But the distance that began with one quiet birthday dinner would eventually lead both of us to the hardest year of our lives. The next morning, I woke up at 6 like I had for most of my adult life. Retirement never changed that. I made coffee, fed the birds in the backyard, and sat on the porch watching the neighborhood slowly come alive. Normally, Michael would have called by then, not to apologize, just to check in. Instead, my phone stayed quiet. I can't say I was surprised. If you've ever carried shame, you know it makes even a simple phone call feel impossible. A few days later, Ashley stopped by. She brought a casserole from a little place in Fishers that Linda used to love. "I figured you shouldn't be eating leftovers on your birthday week," she said with an awkward smile. "You didn't have to do that." I wanted to. We ate lunch in the kitchen. She noticed one of Linda's old gardening gloves still hanging on the hook by the back door. You never move them, I smiled. I tried once. And I put them back. She laughed quietly. I understand. For an hour we talked about everything except that night. Her work, my tomatoes, the Colts' chances that season, the neighbor who somehow managed to lose his garbage can every single Tuesday. Normal things, comfortable things. As she was leaving, she hesitated at the front door. Bill, I looked up. Michael's having a hard time? I imagine he is. He wants to call. I know. But every time he picks up the phone, he puts it back down. I nodded. I'm not making it easy for him either. She frowned. What do you mean? I haven't called him. She gave me a puzzled look. I've spent 42 years making the first move whenever something went wrong. When he was 16, when he was 25, when he got married. This time, I looked out toward the empty driveway. I think he needs to walk across the bridge. Ashley understood. She didn't argue. Before leaving, she hugged me, just like she had outside the restaurant. Don't give up on him. I won't. I just won't chase him. Weeks turned into months. Summer slipped into fall. The phone calls between Michael and me became shorter. Birthdays, a quick text on Father's Day, a voicemail when he knew I wouldn't answer. There wasn't anger between us, just space, the kind that grows quietly if nobody crosses it. Meanwhile, Michael's business seemed to be taking off. I'd hear little bits from Ashley whenever she visited. They had landed another commercial construction contract. They were hiring more employees. Michael was traveling constantly, Chicago, Nashville, Dallas, Atlanta. He barely sleeps. Ashley admitted one afternoon while helping me rake leaves. I keep telling him to slow down. What does he say? Just one more year. I smiled sadly. I used to say the same thing. Did it work? No, she laughed. I figured. Then her smile faded. Sometimes I think he's trying to prove something. To who? She looked away. I don't think he knows anymore. As Christmas approached, I decorated the house exactly the way Linda used to. White lights around the porch, a wreath on the front door, the little ceramic village she'd collected over 20 years. Some traditions are too precious to let go. On the second week of December, I received a Christmas card from Michael and Ashley. Inside was a handwritten note. Love you, Dad, nothing else. No apology, no explanation, just 3 words. I placed it on the mantle. Maybe that was enough for now. Then 3 days before Christmas, my phone rang at 2:17 in the morning. Nobody calls at that hour with good news. I answered before the second ring. Hello. All I heard at first was crying. Then Ashley finally managed to speak. Bill? Her voice broke. It's Michael. There was a long pause. He was driving home from Louisville. Another pause. There was an accident. The coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered across the kitchen floor. What hospital? Methodist. I'm on my way. I didn't even change out of my flannel pajama shirt. I grabbed my truck keys, my wallet, and Linda's old Bible from the nightstand. The roads were nearly empty. Every red light felt personal. Every minute felt stolen. All I could think was one desperate prayer. Please, let me have another chance to talk to my son. The emergency room waiting area smelled like coffee that had been sitting too long and disinfectant that never quite covered the scent of fear. I found Ashley sitting alone in a plastic chair, still wearing the same sweater she'd had on when she'd left for work the day before. Her hair was a mess. Mascara streaked down both cheeks. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, even though it had only been a few hours. The moment she saw me, she stood and wrapped both arms around me. I thought, she whispered, I didn't know who else to call. You called the right person. She buried her face against my shoulder and cried. I just held her there. No speeches, no questions. Some moments don't need words. After a minute, she stepped back and wiped her eyes. The doctors say he's stable. My knees almost gave out. But that one word stopped my relief cold. He has a head injury, several broken ribs, a shattered leg, and there's swelling in his brain. When can I see him? They're moving him into ICU. She looked toward the hallway. They don't know when he'll wake up. I nodded slowly. Then we'll wait. About 20 minutes later, another woman walked briskly into the waiting room, wearing an expensive camel-colored coat and carrying a leather handbag that probably cost more than my first pickup truck. Diane. She walked straight to Ashley. How is he? Ashley explained everything the doctors had said. Diane listened carefully, then pulled out her phone. I've already transferred enough money to cover 30% of whatever insurance doesn't. Ashley blinked. Mom, what? You'll need it. I'm grateful. I know. Diane slipped the phone back into her purse. I can't stay long. Ashley stared at her. You just got here. I have meetings this morning. Ashley couldn't believe what she'd heard. Mom. Diane took both of Ashley's hands. Sweetheart, you're adults. You've built your own life. I've helped financially. Now you need to handle the rest. Ashley looked completely lost. He's your son-in-law, and I care about him. Diane kissed her daughter's forehead. But sitting in a hospital won't change anything. I'll check in later. Then she left, just like that. The automatic doors closed behind her. The room felt strangely empty. Ashley sat down again without saying a word. After several minutes, she whispered almost to herself, I don't understand. I sat beside her. What don't you understand? She loves me. I know she does. But she looked toward the ICU doors. Why does it always feel like love has to fit into her schedule? I didn't answer, because I honestly didn't know. Around noon, a young surgeon came out. We've stabilized him. The next 72 hours are critical. If he wakes up, he paused. We'll know much more. If, the doctor gave me the kindest look he could. Brain injuries don't follow schedules. Then he walked away. Ashley lowered her head into her hands. I looked around the waiting room. Families everywhere. Some praying, some sleeping, some staring at televisions without actually watching. I suddenly remembered something. I'll be right back. Ashley looked up. Where are you going? Home. What? I won't be long. 45 minutes later, I returned carrying a worn leather briefcase, the same one I'd used for years when meeting clients. I set it gently on Ashley's lap. She looked confused. Bill, open it. Inside were neatly organized folders. The deed to my house, retirement account statements, savings certificates, life insurance paperwork, investment records, everything. She looked up at me stunned. What is this? It's everything I own. Bill, I don't know how much this is going to cost. She immediately started shaking her head. No, I don't care. If selling my house gives Michael another chance, I swallowed hard. Then sell the house. Tears streamed down her face. We can't ask you to do that. You didn't. I'm offering. She closed the briefcase and pushed it back toward me. I can't take this. I pushed it gently back. You can. For now. If we don't need it, you'll give it back. Ashley broke down completely. She hugged me tighter than she ever had before. Through tears, she kept repeating the same words. Thank you. I'm so sorry. Thank you. That afternoon, the ICU nurse finally allowed one family member inside. Ashley looked at me. You go first. I shook my head. No. He'll want his wife. She squeezed my hand. He needs his dad too. Together we walked toward the intensive care unit, neither of us knowing whether Michael could hear us or whether he ever would again. The first few days settled into a routine I never imagined I'd know so well. ICU visiting hours, coffee from the vending machine, phone chargers stretched across the waiting room, doctors speaking in careful sentences that never promised too much. Every morning I'd leave my house around 6:30 with a thermos of black coffee and a couple of sandwiches Ashley never remembered to eat. By the time I got to Methodist Hospital, she'd already be sitting beside Michael's bed holding his hand. You slept, I'd ask. She'd give the same little smile every day. For a while. It wasn't true. You could see it in her eyes. By the fourth night, I finally said, "Ashley, go home." She shook her head. "I can't." "Yes, you can. What if he wakes up? Then I'll call you before he has time to complain." She actually laughed. It was the first laugh I'd heard since the accident. "I don't know if I can sleep." "You don't have to sleep. Just shower. Sit on your own couch. Remember what home feels like." She hesitated. Then she leaned over, kissed Michael gently on the forehead, and whispered, "I'll be back in a few hours." When she walked out of the room, I pulled my chair closer to the bed. Machines hummed softly. The heart monitor blinked in steady rhythm. Michael looked so different lying there. His face was bruised. One arm was wrapped in bandages. There were tubes everywhere. It was hard to see the confident businessman who always seemed to be rushing somewhere. I reached over and rested my hand on his. "I guess it's just us tonight." I wasn't sure if he could hear me. The doctor said some patients could, others couldn't. So I talked anyway. I told him about the dog next door that kept stealing my newspaper, about how the Colts somehow still managed to disappoint me every season, about the tomato plants I'd forgotten to cover before the frost. Little things, normal things, the kind of conversations fathers and sons have when life isn't falling apart. Around 2 in the morning, a nurse walked in to check his medication. She smiled when she saw me. "You're here every night." "I've got nowhere more important to be." She adjusted one of the IV lines. "My dad was like that. He stayed with my brother every night after his motorcycle accident." "Your brother, okay." "He is now," she smiled. "My father used to say something." "What was that?" "People remember who sat beside them when they couldn't do anything for themselves." She quietly left the room. Those words stayed with me. The next afternoon, Ashley came back carrying 2 cups of coffee. She looked a little better after finally getting some sleep. We sat together in silence until she spoke. "Bill, yeah, I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything." "I do." She stared at the floor. "My mother's been this way for as long as I can remember. I spent years pretending she didn't hurt people. I kept telling myself, that's just how she is." She wiped away a tear. "But that's not an excuse. I'm sorry for what she said about you." I shook my head. "Ashley, you defended me. You don't need to apologize for someone else's choices." She looked at me with watery eyes. "I wish I could change her." "You can't." "I know." We sat quietly again. A few minutes later, she smiled faintly. "You know what Michael always says when people ask where he learned to fix things?" I looked over. "What?" "My dad never threw anything away before trying to repair it." I chuckled. "Your husband forgot to mention I usually had 3 extra screws left over." She laughed. Then her expression softened. "He really does admire you." "I know. He just got lost." I nodded slowly. "I think a lot of people do." That evening, as the sun disappeared beyond the hospital windows, we sat on opposite sides of Michael's bed. Ashley reached for his left hand. I held his right. She began talking softly. "I'm sorry you've carried so much by yourself. You wanted to build something bigger. You wanted to take care of me. You wanted to prove you belonged." Her voice trembled. "But somewhere along the way, you forgot that you already belonged." I looked at my son. A tear slowly escaped from the corner of his closed eye and rolled down his cheek. Ashley gasped. "Bill!" I saw it. Another tear followed. The monitors never changed. His eyes stayed closed. His body never moved. But tears don't lie. For the first time since the accident, we knew one thing for certain. Michael had hurt us. Michael opened his eyes 3 days later. Not all the way, just enough to let us know he was still with us. The nurse noticed first. "Michael." His eyelids fluttered again. She smiled and stepped into the hallway. "I'll get the doctor." Ashley grabbed his hand so quickly she almost knocked over the water pitcher. "Michael, honey." His eyes moved slowly toward her. Then they drifted across the room until they stopped on me. I was standing beside the window with a paper cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. His lips trembled. He tried to speak. Nothing came out. The breathing tube had already been removed, but his throat was raw. Ashley leaned closer. "It's okay. Don't force it." He blinked once. Then another tear slid down his cheek. I walked over and rested my hand gently on his shoulder. Easy, son. We've got time. The doctor came in with two nurses. After a quick examination, he smiled. This is encouraging. He has a long recovery ahead of him, but this is a very good sign. It was the first hopeful sentence we'd heard in weeks. Over the next several days, Michael slowly became more alert. Speech came back little by little. Walking was still a long way off. Most conversations lasted only a few minutes before he became exhausted. One afternoon, Ashley stepped downstairs to grab lunch. For the first time since the accident, Michael and I were alone. He looked at me for a long moment. His voice was barely above a whisper. Dad? I pulled my chair closer. I'm here. He stopped, closed his eyes, and tried again. I'm sorry. I waited. Not because I wanted to make him uncomfortable, because I wanted him to say what was really on his heart. I lied. Yes. I knew you'd be alone. I know. I kept telling myself, I'd celebrate with you later. His breathing became uneven, but that wasn't the worst part. I stayed quiet. He looked toward the ceiling. I heard everything. I frowned. What do you mean, when I couldn't open my eyes? I heard you. I heard Ashley. I heard both of you. He swallowed hard. I heard you offering everything. His eyes filled again. The house. Your savings. Everything. I looked down at the blanket. It was only money. He shook his head. No, it wasn't. It was your life. His voice cracked. And after everything I did, you still came. For the first time in weeks, I felt tears burning behind my own eyes. I came because you're my son. I didn't deserve it. Maybe not. I smiled gently. But love isn't a reward people earn. It's a promise. He covered his face with one trembling hand. I spent years trying to impress people who never really accepted me. I know. I thought if I kept climbing, I'd finally feel like I belonged. I nodded. And did you? He gave the smallest shake of his head. No. The only place I ever belonged was right here. A knock interrupted us. Ashley stepped back into the room carrying 2 sandwiches. She stopped when she saw both of us wiping away tears. Oh no, she smiled. I missed something. Michael looked at her. No. You found it? She set the food down and kissed his forehead. I'm glad. Recovery was slow, painfully slow. Learning to walk again. Physical therapy. Speech exercises. Long afternoons when even holding a spoon became exhausting. Nearly 7 weeks after the accident, the doctor finally told us Michael would likely go home before Valentine's Day. That afternoon, the 3 of us sat together while winter snow drifted past the hospital windows. Michael looked at me. Dad, I need you to hear something. You don't owe me anything. I do. He took a slow breath. I wasn't chasing money. I was chasing approval. I wanted people like Diane to think I'd earned my place. And somewhere along the way, I forgot whose opinion mattered most. The room grew quiet. I finally told him something I'd never admitted out loud. After your mother died, I got used to eating dinner alone. I got used to quiet birthdays. But you never really get used to waiting for your child to call. Michael cried openly. Ashley reached across the bed and took both our hands. I think we've all been carrying things we never said. For the next hour, nobody argued. Nobody defended themselves. We simply told the truth. It hurt, but somehow, the truth hurt less than the silence we'd been living with. By early spring, Michael was back home. He still walked with a cane, and physical therapy had become part of his weekly routine. Some mornings his leg ached so badly that getting down the front steps looked like climbing a mountain. But every week he moved a little easier, smiled a little more, and worked a little less. That alone told me he had changed. One Saturday afternoon he called. Dad, yeah, you busy? I was about to lose another argument with my lawnmower. He laughed. I was wondering if you wanted to come by the office. The office? I'd like to show you something. When I arrived, the place looked different. The expensive artwork Diane had insisted they buy was gone. The fancy reception furniture had been replaced with practical pieces. Even the conference room felt simpler. Michael noticed me looking around. "We sold a lot of the stuff we didn't need," I smiled. "Looks more comfortable. It feels more honest." He introduced me to every employee by name. Not one introduction included his job title. Not one included how much the company had grown. Instead, he said things like, "This is Eric. He keeps us from making expensive mistakes. This is Rosa. She knows our customers better than anybody. This is Kevin. He can solve problems I don't even understand." On the drive home, I asked him, "What happened?" He looked out the windshield for a moment. "I finally realized that if a business only succeeds because important people approve of you, then you don't really own your success. And now, I'd rather grow slower, but sleep better." I nodded. "That's a pretty good trade." Ashley smiled from the back seat. "I've been trying to tell him that for years." A few months later, they invited me over for dinner. Not because it was Father's Day, not because it was my birthday, just because it was Tuesday. Those ordinary dinners slowly became our new tradition. Sometimes we ordered pizza. Sometimes Michael grilled burgers. Sometimes Ashley tried recipes she found online that turned out better in the pictures than they did on the plate. We laughed about it anyway. Diane remained exactly who she'd always been. She still believed success was measured in circles, influence, and financial statements. She sent generous Christmas gifts. She remembered birthdays. She donated to charities. But she never really understood why sitting beside someone in a hospital mattered more than wiring money to their account. And truthfully, I stopped expecting her to. Not everyone learns the same lessons in life. Late that autumn, Ashley invited me over again. "I have a surprise." When I walked into the living room, Michael was standing there, holding a tiny pair of baby shoes. Ashley smiled through happy tears. "We're having a baby." For a second, I couldn't speak. Then Michael stepped forward and hugged me tighter than he had since he was a teenager. "You ready to be Grandpa?" "I've been ready for years." The following July, our grandson arrived. 7 pounds, 11 ounces. A full head of dark hair. The nurses placed him in my arms, and I thought about Linda. How she would have spoiled that little boy from the minute she met him. Every Friday afternoon became Grandpa Day. I'd read books with silly voices, build wooden toy trucks in my garage, push him on the backyard swing that Michael's grandfather had built for him decades earlier. Life has a funny way of giving old traditions new faces. On my 71st birthday, Michael called a week ahead. "Dad, don't make any plans for Friday." I wasn't planning to. Good. I already made them. At 7 o'clock that evening, we walked into the same steakhouse where everything had fallen apart a year before. This time, there were no excuses. No empty chair waiting for someone else. Just our family. Michael raised his glass. "I almost lost the people who mattered most because I spent too much time trying to impress people who didn't." He looked at me. "Thank you for waiting for me to find my way back." I raised my glass too. Your mother would have been proud. For a moment, none of us spoke. We didn't have to. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it walks in, slowly takes a seat beside you, and quietly becomes part of the family again. If you're listening today and someone you love has lost their way, don't give up too quickly. Set healthy boundaries, speak the truth when it needs to be spoken, and leave room for people to grow. Some of the strongest families aren't the ones that never break. They're the ones willing to rebuild together.